Good morning, Year 10. So last lesson we spent some time revising some of the love and relationship poetry, and the whole of last week we spent some time doing it. So which poems did we look at last lesson? Can you remember? And can you write down the key quotation we explored? So I promised last week that I wouldn't set an essay, but I didn't promise anything about this week. So today we're going to use our revision from the last couple of weeks to try and attempt a love and relationships poetry question. Obviously it's been a while since we've done this, so I'm going to give you 2 lessons to have a go at it, just so we can kind of talk through some ideas during this lesson, and then you'll have obviously your next lesson to write it up. So this is the question. I'd like you to copy it down for me. So explore the importance of nature in love's philosophy and in one other poem. So as a reminder, in the exam they will pick a poem for you. So for example, you have got to talk about love's philosophy, which is one of the texts that we studied this week. You are focusing on nature, so it's asking you to think about the importance of nature. So what you've then got to do is pick a second poem that you can compare to love's philosophy that you think talks about the importance of nature. Now obviously all of the poems that we've looked at this week have all been quite heavy in terms of their comparative abilities, so I would suggest it needs to be one of the poems that we've looked at over the last week. Okay then, so there's 2 ways you can approach this question. The first might be that you're really confident with poetry, you already know what second poem you want to pick, and you already have that in your mind, which makes this stage even easier. It could be that you need to do a little bit of analysis first of all to get yourself started, so that then you can pick a secondary poem. So it's entirely up to you which way you approach this. Obviously the first way is the better way because it means that you know the poems, but there's no kind of pressure at the moment to straight away pick something. So remember that for this essay question they are asking you to think about how the writer has used language and they've used structure to present the importance of nature. So my suggestion would be that at this point you need to get on to annotating the poem, and you need to start thinking about, well, how is nature used in the poem and how is that related in the structure. So remembering that annotation is about writing on the poem and thinking about what that might suggest, okay? Now for these poems where we studied them quite heavily in class and we've thought about specific quotations, you might not need to do a lot of annotation. You might simply need to remind yourself about the rhyme scheme and then you'll be away. But I would say always reread the poem just to make sure that there's nothing else that you think applies to the question more suitably. I mean, this one in nature, our analysis of the quotation, the fountains mingle with the river and see the mountains kiss high heaven, is quite relevant to the question. But it might be that the question they ask you isn't the same as this one, and you might need to go back to the poem and annotate it. So do make sure that you think about the poem's language and structure before you move on. Okay then, so now is your choice, okay? You have got to decide which other poem you could compare this one to. I'm not going to give you any suggestions, you need to figure this out on your own, okay? If you haven't got your anthologies at home with you, I know some of your poetry books are still here. If you Google the name of the poem, it will bring you up a copy of the poem. Remember that in the exam, obviously, you've got to do all this from memory, so if you can do it from memory, that would be better. But if not, you can access the other poems online, get a copy up and annotate it in the same way that you've just annotated love's philosophy. So remember, you are trying to prove that these poets place an importance on nature. So you need to pick another poem that looks at nature and the importance of nature, okay? And quite a lot of the poems that we've looked at this week do that. So use that knowledge. I would suggest that it should take you about 10 minutes to select your secondary poem, think about which language quotation you're going to use, and then to think about which structural feature you're going to discuss. Now, in terms of lessons, I would say you need to spend half of the first lesson planning this. So really, the end of this lesson should just be spent writing your introduction. So majority of your essay writing should be happening next lesson. So as a reminder then, this is how your essay should be structured. This one is slightly lengthier than the other literature essays because obviously you've got to think about 2 texts rather than just one. So you need to write an introduction. So how are you responding to the question? Which 2 texts have you selected? How do they explore nature? Remember, for this introduction, there's that key sentence that we always spoke about. So the fact that the writer uses language, form and structure to present whatever the topic is, because you're always going to be analysing language, form and structure, so you can confidently say that they've used the language, form and structure to present whichever topic is they've asked you to look for, okay? So that should be a stellar question, a stellar sentence that I should see in everyone's introduction. Then you're going to do PCOR number 1. Now, it's not as straightforward as it is for something like Macbeth or A Christmas Carol, because we tell you to always start with the extract. But for poetry, it's whichever way you feel it, it is best. So if you want to look at love's philosophy first, do that. If you want to look at your secondary poem first, do that. Okay, there's no correct way to organise your poems in terms of the order. However, you should look at language first, okay? And you should be able to write full PCORs on your poems, because we did look at language, form and structure, but we also looked at context and what was happening during the period that they were written, and the writer's obvious intentions. So you should be able to create 2 full PCORs on your language, okay? So you're going to compare the language that's used in them, you're going to compare how they both show the importance of nature. Then you are going to use PEE to help you create a structural response. Now remember, it's a comparison question, so you're not going to do PEE on one poem, PEE on the second poem. You're going to do a comparison PEE. So PEE on poem 1, comparison PEE on the second one. So that should all be one big paragraph. It shouldn't seem segmented, like you've thought about one and then the other. They should be working together and a comparison of the structural features that are used. Remember, comparison can be similarities or differences. It doesn't have to be a similarity. And then you're going to write your conclusion. We shouldn't introduce anything new at this point. You should just be summarising your view. Okay, so as I've said, this is going to take 2 lessons. I'm going to attach this video to both lessons so that you can go back through, talk through the steps again. But your essay should be finished by the end of the second lesson, and I want them sending in to me. There's a couple of you who haven't sent me any of the essays that I've asked for. There's a couple of you who have sent me one of the essays that I've asked for. I understand that working from home is different. I understand that you're not in the classroom, you've not got me stood over your shoulder. But the reality is you guys will sit a full set of exams next year. The coronavirus, the vaccination is coming out, things are happening, things are moving forward. The reality of you being impacted and your GCSEs being impacted by it is very little. And at the end of the day, we've got 1 text to study for literature now. We are at the end of the qualification. You've got no reason to not be submitting these essays. There's nobody who's not studied any of these texts, okay? So it is a little bit of a rant, and I am a little bit upset about it, but if I'm asking for essays, I want to see them. There's no reason for why any of you should not be sending me essays, okay? And also, I never thought I would have to talk about this with you, but plagiarism is a very, very, disgusting thing to do, okay? Plagiarism means that you claim that somebody else's work is your own. Now, we don't have that problem in class because you can't do that. You've got to write it yourself. At home, obviously, the internet is a very wide, boat of ideas, and it is very easy for you to copy and paste something. But just know, I'm not stupid. I do know when it's not your own work. I've read your work now for 3 solid years. I know how you write, what your ideas are. I can tell straight away that it's not your work. And if you send me something that's plagiarised, then that really does impact my thoughts and feelings on you as a student, but it also impacts your standard of work. You're clearly not working if you're just copying and pasting somebody else's essay. So I'm not going to speak about it for much longer because it doesn't deserve the time of day. It's laziness and it's not the academics that I've built you up to be. So if you know that you have plagiarised something in the past or that you are planning on plagiarising something in the future, don't do it. It's a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time. I will know it's plagiarised and you will be pulled up on it, and I'll make you do the essay again. All right, so just so we're nice and clear on plagiarism. Right, thank you. Make sure you complete the show my homework quiz.